The sky above the European front was a canvas of chaos, a tumultuous swirl of gray clouds pierced by streaks of sunlight, each beam illuminating the iron-boned birds of war that roared across the heavens, their engines screaming a cacophony of death and destruction that rattled the nerves of every pilot daring to challenge the German Luftwaffe that had, until that day, seemed untouchable, invincible, and merciless. A force that had already claimed countless lives, shredded countless wings of Allied aircraft, and left a trail of smoke and despair across the continent. Yet there he was, a lone figure gripping the controls of his battered fighter, a man whose heart pounded not with fear, but with a raw, electrifying determination born from months of relentless training, sleepless nights, and a gnawing awareness that his survival and the very fate of his squadron depended on split-second decisions, uncanny instincts, and a daring that bordered on madness. And in that single, suspended moment, as the rumble of approaching engines grew louder, each note a harbinger of impending doom, he knew that the sky around him was about to erupt into a storm of bullets. Fire and steel, a storm so vast that mere mortals would have cowered. Yet he tightened his grip, adjusted his goggles against the glare, and felt the exhilarating pulse of adrenaline surge through his veins, each beat a drum calling him forward into the maelstrom. Because what lay ahead was not merely a dogfight, not merely a scramble to survive, but a challenge that would define him. A test so perilous and so finely balanced on the razor's edge of life and death that every maneuver, every dive, every twist of the throttle could spell victory or annihilation. And in that moment, as the first silhouettes of enemy fighters appeared against the fractured sky, their formation like a predator circling its prey, he realized that he was outnumbered 50-1, and yet a strange, almost defiant calm settled over him. A clarity born from an almost obsessive focus honed in the crucible of prior battles where hesitation had meant obliteration. And now, faced with the most overwhelming odds imaginable, he began to calculate, to anticipate, to read the rhythm of the enemy, every movement a potential clue. Every twitch of a wing or change in engine pitch, a language he had spent countless hours deciphering, a language of death that he had to master to survive, to turn the nightmarish scenario of being alone against 50 skilled and ruthless opponents into an opportunity, a chance not merely to escape, but to outwit, outmaneuver, and outlive those who sought to erase him from the sky. Because in the seconds that stretched like hours, he understood that brute force alone would not save him. Cunning, agility, audacity, and an almost preternatural understanding of both his aircraft and the psychology of his adversaries would be his only salvation. And so, as tracer fire began to lace the clouds with streaks of orange and white, each burst narrowly missing him, yet sending shivers down his spine, he initiated a sequence of maneuvers so audacious that they seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Dives that twisted his plane through impossibly tight arcs, rolls that inverted him just long enough to draw enemy fire past him, climbs so sudden they forced pursuers into miscalculations, each action executed with the precision of a man who had long ago decided that fear was a luxury he could not afford. And as he danced this deadly ballet above the devastated landscape below, towns burning in the distance, rivers reflecting the pale light of a sun struggling to pierce the chaos, he felt an uncanny rhythm emerge, a beat that synchronized him to the tumult around him, turning panic into anticipation, chaos into a strategic map in his mind where each enemy fighter, each tracer, each cloud of smoke became part of a grand, an almost operatic narrative in which he was both protagonist and composer, orchestrating a symphony of evasion and counterattack. And as the enemy tightened their formation, seemingly closing every avenue of escape, he spotted an opening fleeting, a narrow corridor of opportunity between two fighters, and with a heart hammering like a war drum, he dove, twisted, and emerged in a position that seemed impossible, almost miraculous, leaving his pursuers momentarily stunned, a pause that, in the life-and-death calculus of aerial combat, was eternity, a moment he would exploit, for he knew instinctively that hesitation by even a single enemy pilot could be the difference between survival and fiery oblivion. And as he pressed on, weaving through the lethal tapestry of enemy aircraft, he drew upon every ounce of training, intuition, and fearless creativity he possessed, recalling moments from prior sorties, the feel of his aircraft responding under duress, the subtle cues that told him how engines would react to sudden maneuvers, and the mental maps of the sky he had constructed in countless drills, all converging in a torrent of action that left no room for error. And yet, amid the storm of bullets and roaring engines, a strange exhilaration surged through him, a thrill that only the most desperate and skilled pilots ever felt. A mixture of terror and euphoria that heightened every sense, sharpened every reflex, and made him hyper-aware of every movement, every possibility, every infinitesimal chance to turn the tables on the overwhelming enemy. And in that split second, as the clouds themselves seemed to twist and bend with the intensity of the conflict, he made the first of a series of decisions that would come to define his legendary status. A decision that combined audacity, ingenuity, and an almost uncanny understanding of the human mind under pressure. Because he realized that to survive, he could not merely react. He had to dictate the rhythm of battle, to force the enemy to play his game, to draw them into traps of his own design. And as he initiated the first daring maneuver, a dive so sudden, it forced two of the enemy fighters into a collision avoidance that almost sent them spiraling out of control. He felt the first glimmer of a strategy that could turn near certain death into improbable survival. A strategy that required every ounce of skill, courage, and nerve he possessed. And as he climbed out of the dive, narrowly avoiding a hail of bullets that scorched the sky around him, he caught sight of his next target, an experienced ace whose arrogance had placed him slightly ahead of formation. And he knew that exploiting such flaws, reading patterns in the enemy's confidence and miscalculations, was the key to even having a chance to escape the seemingly insurmountable odds. And so he continued maneuver after maneuver, a relentless display of aerial cunning, precision, and nerve. Each second, a lifetime. Each decision, a potential pivot between survival and destruction. While the distant rumble of artillery from the ground below and the staccato crackle of anti-aircraft fire added layers of danger and drama to the unfolding epic, making every heartbeat, every breath, every motion a critical component in a battle that was as much mental chess as it was physical endurance. And as the minutes stretched, the relentless pursuit of 50 German fighters transformed into a deadly chess match in the sky, a contest of wits, skill, courage, and daring that would either immortalize him as a legend or consign him to the annals of forgotten heroes lost in smoke and steel. And with each passing maneuver, the tension built to unbearable heights, hooks and suspense tightening around the viewer as if they themselves were strapped into the cockpit. Feeling the trembling roar of engines, the searing heat of near misses, and the intoxicating, terrifying exhilaration of flying on the razor's edge of life and death, knowing, as he knew, that in the next breath, the next split-second choice, the balance could tip, and every move, every dive, every twist, every daring roll, was not just survival, was history in the making. And so the story begins not with calm, not with certainty, but with the pulse-bounding, nerve-shredding tension of a lone pilot facing 50 enemies, a man armed with nothing but skill, courage, audacity, and the unshakable belief that he could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlive every single one of them, setting the stage for a tale of heroism, ingenuity, and survival that would echo through time, inspiring awe and disbelief, leaving viewers clinging to every word, every image, every heartbeat of the unfolding drama, because this is not merely a story of war. It is the story of a pilot who, against all odds, would dance with death, defy logic, and survive to tell the tale. The first minute of a journey so gripping that no viewer would dare look away. The opening hook that drags you into a storm of steel, fire and sky demanding your attention, your imagination, and your heart. And as the narrative hurtles forward, every second brimming with suspense, every motion a thrilling gambit, it becomes clear that what follows is not just history, it is the living, breathing moment of a man facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender. a testament to courage, intellect, and the indomitable human spirit. And as the first minute closes with the enemy tightening their noose, the stage is set for a breathtaking sequence of maneuvers, near misses, and daring improvisations that will define the legend of the pilot who outsmarted 50 German fighters. A story told in blood, sweat, fire, and steel, designed to hold every viewer captive, unable to look away. Hearts pounding in unison with the engines, eyes wide with suspense, minds racing to keep up with the genius, the courage, and the audacity unfolding in real time above the smoking ruins of a war-torn continent. As the clouds whipped past at blinding speeds, twisting and tumbling under the furious ballet of engines and wings, the lone pilot's mind raced in tandem with his aircraft, calculating angles, predicting trajectories, and anticipating reactions of men trained to kill, yet blinded by their own overconfidence. A deadly combination of skill and hubris that he knew he could exploit if only he remained focused. Sharp and utterly fearless, and in that critical moment, with tracer fire streaking past his canopy like incandescent serpents, he realized that survival demanded more than just agility. It required imagination, a mind that could think 10 moves ahead, crafting maneuvers that no enemy pilot would anticipate, yet so audacious that even he, in calmer times, might have doubted his ability to execute. Yet necessity is the mother of genius, and so he dove, twisted, rolled, and climbed in a sequence so complex and fluid it was as if the very air itself obeyed his will, defying gravity while demanding perfection, a perfection that teetered on the edge of chaos. Because a single miscalculation would mean instant destruction, a fiery death, or being torn apart in midair by the lethal geometry of 50 opponents converging on a single target with relentless precision. And as he carved his path through the storm of wings and bullets, he felt a strange, almost transcendental awareness of the battlefield, a heightened perception in which he could see trajectories before they happened, feel the stress on his airframe as if it were an extension of his own body, and sense the intentions of enemy pilots through subtle visual cues. The tilt of a wing, the slight hesitation in a climb, a fraction of a second that separated a kill from survival, a life from death. And as he executed a daring inverted roll to evade a twin attack from 2 Focke-Wulfs converging from different angles, the adrenaline surged in waves that blurred thought and instinct into one seamless current of action. And every nerve in his body seemed electrified, alert to even the smallest shift in wind, engine pitch, or enemy formation, because at that altitude and speed, with 50 adversaries surrounding him, nothing could be taken for granted, and yet, within that crucible of terror and beauty, he found clarity, a method in the madness, a rhythm that allowed him to choreograph his survival in real time, bending the very laws of probability in his favor, through audacity and mastery. And as he maneuvered, exploiting tiny gaps in enemy formations, weaving between clouds to mask his movements, he began to notice patterns in the Germans' pursuit, their overconfidence and their predictable reliance on formation. Each error a small opening, each hesitation a potential lifeline, and he exploited them with precision, each evasive roll, dive, or climbing turn calculated to exact maximum confusion, to force collisions or miscalculations, to turn overwhelming numbers into a battlefield of illusions, and his bullets tore the air around him, sparks of tracer fire illuminating the cockpit like deadly fireworks. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just for himself but for the men in his squadron, for the missions they had flown, for the people depending on the success of their efforts, and the countless lives that hung in the balance, because survival was not a solitary affair, it was a statement of defiance, a message that courage and intelligence could triumph over sheer force. And in this dizzying dance of engines, wings and bullets, he became more than a man in a plane. He became a force of nature, a whirlwind of motion, calculation, and fearless execution. And as he spotted an opening beneath the dense cloud cover, a narrow lane that could allow him to break the immediate encirclement, he made the split-second decision to descend into it, risking anti-aircraft fire from the ground, but gaining a fleeting advantage over the pursuing fighters. And in that heart-stopping descent, the airframe shuddered under stress, the engines roared in protest, and the bullets from above scythed through the sky mere inches from the cockpit. Yet with unparalleled focus, he threaded the needle, twisting the throttle, adjusting rudder, and banking with near-telepathic timing and the enemy. Caught off guard by this audacious gambit, faltered, their formation disrupted, giving him the first real chance to breathe, if only for a heartbeat. A moment of respite in which he could recalibrate, assess, and prepare for the next round of the deadly chess game unfolding above the European countryside. With rivers like silver veins, forests like shattered green carpets, and villages dotted with smoke and fire. Each landscape featured potentially hiding anti-aircraft positions, each shadow a potential threat. Yet he saw opportunity in every corner, exploiting terrain, clouds, and even the sun to mask his movements, to bait the enemy into errors. And as he climbed again, escaping a perilous dive from the left flank, he executed a sudden roll to the right, a maneuver so precise and daring that it forced two enemy pilots to overcorrect, slamming their planes into a violent spin that sent them careening toward the ground, a testament to the pilot's growing mastery of not just his plane, but the entire airspace. And as the realization of his own audacity sank in, he felt a surge of both exhilaration and gravity, knowing that while one mistake could still doom him, each successful maneuver emboldened him, sharpened his instincts, and allowed him to push the limits of possibility, testing not just his courage, but the very laws of aerial combat. And as the sky became a swirling maelstrom of smoke, tracer fire, and spinning aircraft, the narrative tension escalated, hooks tightening like a noose around the viewer's attention. Because in these moments, the story was not merely about planes or tactics, it was about a single human being, facing insurmountable odds, thinking faster, reacting faster, and surviving where all others would have fallen. And as he executed another near-impossible evasive sequence, threading between two clouds while the enemy fired relentlessly, the viewer feels the pulse, the terror, the thrill, and the breathtaking suspense that defines the first minute of this tale, a moment where skill meets instinct, courage meets necessity, and the impossible begins to feel within reach, setting the stage for the next sequences of audacious maneuvers, clever traps, and life-defying actions that will cement this pilot's story as legend, a story of intelligence, bravery, and unrelenting determination against the might of 50 experienced and ruthless adversaries. And as the seconds stretch and the battle intensifies, it becomes clear that every choice, every movement, every heartbeat matters, and that survival is not a matter of luck, but of genius, audacity, and mastery under fire. And the audience is drawn in, utterly captivated, heart racing, eyes glued to the unfolding drama. As the stage is set for a saga that will test every limit, challenge every assumption, and keep viewers on the edge of their seats, craving the next twist, the next maneuver, the next breathtaking moment in the story of the pilot who outsmarted 50 German fighters and lived to tell the tale, the legend whose courage, skill, and audacity will echo through history and capture imaginations in ways that no ordinary tale of war ever could. Because this is more than a story, it is an experience, a visceral journey, a first-person ride into the chaos, danger, and glory of the skies over war-torn Europe, a tale of survival against impossible odds. And the opening act, the first minute, has already hooked the viewer, leaving them unable to look away as the saga continues to unfold, a relentless, gripping chronicle of ingenuity, bravery, and the sheer will to live. The cacophony of engines, the relentless staccato of tracer fire, and the deafening roar of the wind, rushing past the fuselage, created a sensory overload that would have paralyzed any ordinary pilot. But for him, it was a symphony, a pulse that synchronized with his own heartbeat, sharpening his perception and focus to near superhuman levels. And as he banked sharply to avoid a trio of Mi-19s converging from above, his mind ran through an intricate mental map of the sky, calculating angles, velocities, and the probable reactions of each enemy pilot. Knowing that a single misstep could mean the difference between living to fight another day and spiraling into a fiery death among the twisted wreckage of metal and flame, and yet he moved with a confidence born from experience, instinct, and an audacious willingness to defy convention. Because in the chaos of aerial combat, the timid die quickly, while the bold, the imaginative, and the precise carve out moments of survival that become legends. And as he spiraled down through a cloud bank to shake two pursuers on his 6 o'clock, the sudden moment of obscurity offered both danger and opportunity, a chance to reset, reposition, and exploit the enemy's momentary confusion. And as he emerged from the mist, he spotted a break in the formation of a flight of FW-190s, a sliver of airspace no wider than the span of his wings. And in a split-second calculation, he dove through it, the slipstream, buffeting the fuselage, the wind tearing at the control surfaces, the enemy pilots too slow to anticipate, resulting in a chaotic cascade as two planes collided in the sky behind him, a lethal consequence of his daring, but a testament to his ability to manipulate not only his aircraft, but the entire battlefield in real time, bending enemy behavior like a master strategist bending pawns on a chessboard, and as he leveled out, the landscape below spinning in dizzying motion. He could feel the mental strain gnawing at him, every sense pushed to its limit. Yet he welcomed it, because in that extreme focus, fear was transformed into a razor-sharp awareness that allowed him to anticipate, react, and execute with surgical precision. Every motion a combination of trained instinct and improvisational genius. And as another group of fighters approached from the left, he noticed their formation faltering, a result of their focus on the previous engagement and the subtle manipulations he had initiated. And seizing the moment, he executed a series of complex maneuvers: a half roll, a sudden climb, a splitus dive that forced the enemy to overcorrect, sending one pilot into a spinning dive, narrowly missing his wingman, but causing a chain reaction that left 3 enemy aircraft temporarily disoriented. And in that heartbeat of chaos, he had created space, a fleeting yet vital advantage that he would exploit to survive another minute, another maneuver, another impossible feat. Because survival in that sky was not about raw courage alone. It was about timing, calculation, audacity, and the ability to force enemies to make errors through psychological and spatial manipulation. And as he banked sharply, peeling away from the confusion, the sun glinting off his canopy in blinding streaks, he caught sight of another pursuer attempting an aggressive intercept, their aim precise, their confidence deadly. And yet, he remained unshaken, calculating the trajectory, the wind, the engine response, and the enemy's probable mental patterns, and then, with a sudden twist that defied conventional aerodynamics, he inverted, rolled, and pulled into a vertical climb, forcing the enemy to overshoot, leaving them momentarily behind and above him. A dangerous but necessary gamble, and as he leveled out once more, the enormity of what he was accomplishing settled over him. Because against 50 experienced and deadly enemy pilots, he was not just surviving, he was dictating the rhythm of battle, turning impossible odds into a controlled chaos in which he held the advantage. However fleeting, and his bullets seared past his wings, tracer fire painting the sky in deadly arcs. The viewer feels every heartbeat, every breath, every infinitesimal twitch of control, as if strapped into the cockpit themselves, sensing the fear, the exhilaration, and the sheer audacity of a man playing with death in the clouds. And in that moment, with smoke from distant ground fires trailing below and the shattered remnants of enemy planes spinning toward the earth, he knew that each maneuver was not just about survival, but about storytelling, crafting a narrative in the sky that would become legend, a tale of cunning, skill, and the unbreakable human spirit. And as he climbed again, narrowly avoiding the fire of another Mi-109, he felt the rhythm of the battle crystallize, a mental map of space, time, and probability unfolding in his mind, allowing him to anticipate enemy moves, create openings, and exploit the tiniest miscalculations. And in the midst of this intricate aerial ballet, he began to feel a strange exhilaration, a clarity that only comes when one is alive at the razor's edge, where fear, skill, and courage converge into a single, unstoppable force. And as the first intense minute stretched into the second, the viewer is drawn deeper, utterly captivated. Heart racing in sync with the engines, eyes glued to the unfolding drama, unable to look away as the lone pilot, outnumbered 50-1, turns the chaos of combat into a symphony of survival. Each maneuver more daring than the last, each evasion a testament to ingenuity, each calculated risk a dance with death. And in that breathtaking sequence, the tension ratchets higher, hooks and suspense tightening with every passing second. Because the story is no longer just about planes or bullets, it is about intellect, courage and audacity, the human spirit pitted against overwhelming odds. And the first act has already set the stage for a legendary tale that will keep viewers on the edge of their seats, gripping every word, every detail, every heartbeat. As the saga of the pilot who outsmarted 50 German fighters continues to unfold, a story so gripping that even the most seasoned viewer cannot look away. And as he banks sharply, diving once more into the clouds to evade pursuers, the audience feels the vertigo, the thrill, and the terror of a man who has become one with the sky, mastering chaos, bending probability, and surviving where survival seems impossible. And in this single, relentless, pulse-pounding narrative, the first part of the story reaches a crescendo of suspense and adrenaline, leaving the viewer desperate to see the next astonishing sequence of maneuvers, daring gambits and near misses that will define the legend of the pilot who defied death, outsmarted 50 enemies, and emerged alive to tell the tale. And as he twists, rolls, dives, and climbs in a seamless dance of life and death, the story grips the viewer entirely, ensuring that they will remain glued to the screen, heart racing, eyes wide, mind racing to anticipate the next move, fully immersed in a cinematic experience of courage, ingenuity, and aerial mastery that will only intensify as the narrative pushes forward. Asterisk. As the sun broke through ragged clouds and piercing shafts of light, reflecting off the twisted metal of nearby wreckage and the sleek fuselages of enemy fighters, the lone pilot felt the full weight of the battle pressing down upon him, each second stretching into an eternity where the margin for error was almost non-existent. And yet, amid this storm of fire, steel, and smoke, he found an almost unnatural clarity, the kind that only comes when survival is no longer a hope, but an imperative, and every muscle, every nerve, every synapse in his body seemed synchronized with the furious pulse of the sky, allowing him to execute maneuvers that defied ordinary comprehension. And as a wingman of the enemy formation attempted an aggressive interception from the left, he anticipated the move before the plane fully materialized into view, initiating a splitus dive so abrupt and precise that the pursuer overshot entirely, spinning violently past him and leaving an opening so narrow that it would have seemed impossible to any other pilot. Yet in his mind it was the only path forward. And as he leveled out, the roar of engines and the staccato bursts of enemy fire became almost rhythmic, each sound cue a data point feeding into his strategic calculus, guiding him through a deadly labyrinth of airspace that seemed designed to trap him. Yet he twisted, rolled, and climbed with an elegance that turned chaos into opportunity, bending probability in his favor, exploiting patterns in the enemy's formation, and exploiting their overconfidence with almost surgical precision. And as he twisted into a sharp vertical climb to evade a converging pair of Mi-19Z, the airframe shuddered under immense strain, wings flexing, the fuselage groaning like a living creature. And yet he pressed on, trusting every calculation, every instinct, every split-second decision that had brought him this far, knowing that hesitation would be fatal, that indecision would mean fiery death amid the clouds. And as he reached the apex of his climb, he executed a sudden stall turn, dropping behind an enemy fighter and forcing a collision avoidance maneuver that sent the German plane skidding into the clouds. Another testament to his audacity in the precise mental mapping of the sky he had maintained for minutes that felt like hours. Each maneuver not just survival, but psychological warfare, forcing the enemy to second-guess themselves. break formation, and succumb to the tiny openings he created, all while maintaining absolute awareness of his own aircraft's limitations. The stress on the wings, the fatigue creeping into muscles, and the mental strain of orchestrating an aerial ballet against 50 deadly opponents, and as he leveled out once more, he noticed a fleeting glimpse of a distant fighter squadron attempting to cut him off from the open sky. And with a daring combination of barrel rolls, high G dives, and sudden climbing turns, he threaded between them, exploiting the gaps, confusing the enemy's spatial orientation, and turning a near-certain trap into a pathway for survival. A sequence so audacious that the viewers, if watching through his eyes, would feel the vertigo, the adrenaline, and the breathtaking suspense. Heart pounding with every shift in altitude, every twist of the throttle, every evasive maneuver, and as the first round of enemy aircraft regrouped for a second assault, he anticipated their coordination, predicting movements. Reading the psychology of men trained to fight but blind to ingenuity, and with a sudden, almost impossible inversion, he emerged above them, out of immediate danger, yet fully prepared to manipulate the next wave. Because he understood that in this aerial chess game, he could never simply react. He had to dictate, to control, to bend events to his will, using audacity as a weapon, as potent as bullets or fire, and as tracer fires seared the air around him. The narrative tension for the viewer climbed, hooks tightening, suspense building, every near miss an injection of adrenaline into the audience's imagination, drawing them deeper into the cockpit, into the mind, into the moment, until they are as invested, as terrified, and as exhilarated as the pilot himself. And as he executed a daring split-as dive to evade 3 converging fighters, while simultaneously positioning himself for a counterattack, the artistry of his maneuvers became evident, a dance of precision, timing, an audacious improvisation that left the enemy scrambling, breaking formations and leaving openings he could exploit. And as he climbed sharply after the dive, narrowly avoiding the fire of another Mi-109 that seemed to appear from nowhere, he assessed the battlefield, recalculated, and plotted his next sequence of maneuvers, because in this deadly game, hesitation was fatal and creativity was salvation. And as the smoke from previous collisions drifted through the clouds, mingling with the sunlight and casting fleeting shadows over his wings, he saw opportunity, gaps in the enemy formation that only he could exploit. And with a combination of instinct, training, and daring beyond reason, he executed a sequence of rolls, dives, and climbs that confused and scattered the enemy, turning 50 opponents into chaos, and in that moment, the viewer is pulled entirely into the story, living every second, feeling every risk, every heartbeat, every surge of adrenaline, as if they were strapped into the cockpit themselves, experiencing the raw intensity of combat, the razor's-edge tension between life and death, and the genius of a man who refused to be beaten by numbers, training, or firepower. And as he leveled out after his latest sequence, the clouds around him spinning, tracers weaving deadly patterns, engines screaming, the sun glinting off the wings of enemy planes, he realized that the battle was far from over, yet he was already imposing his rhythm, his strategy, and his audacity upon the fight, turning what should have been a massacre into a sequence of carefully orchestrated survival, a story that grips viewers with hooks, suspense, and escalating tension, every maneuver more audacious than the last, every second a heartbeat closer to legend. And as the first 10 minutes of aerial combat condensed into a series of breathtaking maneuvers, near misses, and calculated gambits, the audience is left hanging on every word, every turn, every dive, fully immersed in the tale of the pilot who would outsmart 50 German fighters, a story so thrilling, so daring, so heart-pounding that no viewer would dare look away. The narrative tension ratcheted ever higher, setting the stage for the next sequences of audacious action, clever deception, and life-defying ingenuity, all designed to keep hearts racing, eyes wide, and imaginations captured by a tale that is equal parts suspense, strategy, and sheer, unrelenting courage. A story that promises not just survival, but legend. *, the relentless pursuit continued. 50 German fighters like shadows of death closing in from every angle, their engines screaming a chorus of impending doom, yet he remained unshaken, a calm born of focus, skill, and a refusal to surrender coursing through him. And as tracer rounds scorched the air around his wings, leaving trails of fire that threatened to ignite his very aircraft, he executed a series of maneuvers so complex and audacious that they seemed almost impossible. Weaving through clouds, diving, climbing, rolling, twisting, turning, all in perfect synchronization with the rhythm of the chaos around him. Each movement a calculated gamble, each decision a razored choice between life and death. And as he spotted a narrow opening between a pair of pursuing FW-190s, he dove, pulling the stick hard into a near impossible splits, the fuselage straining, wings bending under pressure, bullets whipping past him in an inferno of fire and fury, and the enemy, momentarily caught off guard by his audacity, faltered, leaving him the first real gap in the lethal encirclement. And as he leveled out, climbing sharply to escape the aftermath of the dive, he could see the chaos his maneuvers had sown. Enemy planes, spinning, colliding, or forced to break formation. A testament to his ingenuity and mastery of both aircraft and battlefield. And in that heartbeat, the viewer is drawn fully into the cockpit, sensing the vertigo, the tension, and the exhilaration. Feeling each heartbeat, each breath, each nerve on fire with adrenaline, as if they themselves were dodging death at 300 miles per hour. And as he rolled sharply to evade another aggressive attack from the left flank, he calculated the precise timing, angle, and thrust needed to pull off a maneuver that few pilots could even imagine. Twisting the throttle, banking the wings, adjusting the rudder, and in a perfect combination of instinct and audacity, he emerged in a position that not only avoided the bullets, but turned the enemy's momentum against them, forcing one fighter to overshoot, leaving it vulnerable to a collision with another pursuer. And as he leveled once more, the adrenaline surged, his senses heightened to the point of almost superhuman perception. Seeing threats before they fully materialized, anticipating maneuvers before they were executed, and using that foresight to navigate the deadly dance of death with precision and creativity. And as he executed a daring climb to evade a sudden attack from a quartet of Mi-19s, he could feel the strain on the airframe, the stress on the wings, the roar of the engines screaming under maximum load, yet he pressed on, trusting every calculation, every instinct, every split-second decision that had brought him this far. And as he twisted into a sharp barrel roll to evade tracer fire that seared past his canopy, narrowly missing his tail, he exploited the opening created by the enemy's overreaction, drawing them into a trap of their own making, and the audience pulled taut by suspense. Feels every pulse, every flicker of hope, every heartbeat teetering on the edge of catastrophe, fully immersed in a story that blends precision, bravery, and audacity on a level rarely witnessed. And as he leveled out and scanned the sky, he saw glimpses of gaps, mistakes, and miscalculations by the enemy pilots, opportunities to survive another sequence, and with an almost preternatural combination of intuition and calculation, he threaded his aircraft through these fleeting asterisk openings, twisting, diving, climbing, rolling, leaving the enemy scrambling, confused, and vulnerable. And as the minutes stretched, each maneuver became more daring, each evasion more precise, each decision a statement of mastery over death itself. And the viewer, gripped by tension, cannot look away. Heart racing in sync with the engines, adrenaline coursing through their veins, senses consumed by the drama unfolding above a smoking, war-torn European landscape, towns burning, rivers reflecting shattered sunlight, forests scarred by artillery, all forming a backdrop to the impossible feat of survival being performed by a single pilot. And as he executed yet another splitus dive, narrowly avoiding two converging FW-190s, while simultaneously setting up a maneuver to exploit their positioning, the genius of his aerial chess game becomes evident, a combination of skill, audacity, and creativity that bends the battlefield to his will. And as he twisted and rolled into a final climb, avoiding bullets that could have ended him, he felt a surge of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that the battle was far from over. Yet he had already turned the tide in subtle but powerful ways, leaving the enemy scattered, disoriented, and vulnerable, and the suspense for the viewer reached its peak. Hooks tighten, tension unbearable, every second of narrative a pulse pounding. Immersive experience that makes them feel every near miss, every audacious decision, every split-second gamble. And as he banked sharply into a final maneuver of the sequence, threading between clouds and enemy aircraft with impossible precision, the story delivers the first minute of gripping, heart-stopping suspense, establishing the legend of the pilot who would outsmart 50 German fighters, survive impossible odds, and live to tell the tale, leaving the viewer fully immersed, unable to look away, utterly captivated. Hearts racing, minds racing, eyes glued to the screen, ready to follow every twist, turn, and daring move as the saga of skill, courage, and human ingenuity continues to unfold, setting the stage for the next sequences of breathtaking maneuvers. Clever deception and life-defying ingenuity, ensuring that the story's suspense, hooks, and engagement carry forward seamlessly, leaving no viewer willing to blink, because this is more than a tale of war. It is the living, breathing moment of a man mastering the skies, defying impossible odds, and setting the stage for legend. An unforgettable, pulse-pounding, adrenaline-charged narrative that will hold the audience completely captive for the entirety of the story.